And let that be a lesson to people about the pragmatic, moderate mind, because people freak out on the extremes. Some people might hear what you just said, Josh, and be like, this is ridiculous. We're not even going green. We're not even being made in America. We're bringing stuff in from China or from China through Mexico, or we're, all this kind of stuff. And then other people on the other side might freak out and say, nobody will be able to drive or buy a gas car. They're going to take my cars. And the truth is in the middle. The truth is that, like a lot of these companies, like Elon Musk himself, a lot of these things are aspirational visions. 90% of this, made in America, that, right? No gas vehicles by 2030 or 2035 or wherever. These are aspirations. And then real life hits you. And now you've got 40-50% of it is American, which is more than it would have been had they not put the aspiration out there to begin with. It would have not been anywhere near that.
Welcome back to Turn Down for What, your source for EV news and updates. Like and subscribe for more content like this episode. Let's dive on in.
Welcome back to Turn Down for What? Another week,
Another episode.
and here we go. Well, today we are kind of catching up on some recent news. There's been several key things that have kind of been announced, and also just kind of relevant EV data that's kind of interesting to be shared. New vehicles produced. So just something to really kind of go over and study. And so wanted to kind of pick through some of those recent updates. Jesse, Chris, who wants to go first?
Chris.
Well, yeah. So I've been kind of just keeping an eye on the earnings calls that have been coming out, because there's always interesting information and nuggets that come through if you listen to them. You'll get little posts from Sawyer Merritt and others, on X or CNBC, but they're usually kind of just narrow and focused on whatever that person's kind of agenda or point of view is, which makes sense because these things are hour-long calls. um Ford one was an interesting one, man, and I continue to not be a stock guy. This is not stock advice. I'm not an expert in any of this stuff at all. And it's always interesting to watch the markets, because when I listened to the call, I thought it was a good call. And then promptly after hours, Ford took it to the shorts, and and dipped down. But
It's
it
probably because
was,
once again, I mean, the news that comes out of that is the losses in the EV space, which I mean they're doing a
yeah.
lot of investing in, but still, I mean, I think that's what the investors take away is the losses. Outside of all the optimism of everything that they're building, it's a temporary season of the pullback before it kind of accelerates, in my opinion. But
Yeah, it was strange to listen to it, and then see the reaction afterwards, because even with those losses, I thought they did a good job of explaining them. Maybe the street sees the explanations as excuses. So it was interesting to hear kind of what came out of that. And then right before it, there was an interview that Jim Farley did on a podcast that wasn't ours. So Jim, we'd love to have you on the show. But it was a great podcast, and he talked about how he's been driving around a Xiaomi for the last 6 months,
yeah,
which is a great car, and China is making some great cars. And my take was like, good, you should be. And then, but people go crazy about that. Why is the CEO of Ford driving a Xiaomi Chinese car? And this is, he should be fired, and all kinds of crazy reactions from people. And it, was brought over and imported as a research vehicle. And it's not like the guy is, taking it down to the grocery store. He's had access to it for 6 months, along with, probably a dozen other cars that he drives. But he really liked it, had great things to say. And I think that's going to inform, in a lot of ways what they do. And they talked not about Xiaomi, but about BYD on the call. And kind of here's how it broke down. It basically, has been the story every quarter, Ford Pro made the bulk of the money, and that's how it's been. Ford Blue made some money. Ford Finance made money. Software subscriptions made money. A lot of that on the Pro side, not as much as you might think on the Blue Cruise, which has subscriptions as well, but it was more the fleet management software where they really do a great job in making money. And they're making billions, like 1.8 billion on Pro and 1.5 on Blue, and 800 million on finance and all this stuff, right? And so they're making money all over the place on this stuff. And then of course comes where they didn't. um Model E being the big one, lost 1.2 billion, but that's down from 1.8 And of that 1.2 billion, a big chunk of that, the majority of that, was because they canceled the 3-row SUV project, and they scrapped it. And so they had to scrap all of the development costs, and they had to recognize all of that. And so that was a big part of that. They also talked about Turkey. Turkey, I guess, has had some inflation, and them being a global company manufacturing all over the place. There was some impact there. And then the last one was something that I know a lot about. Anybody that's been following me on X and a little bit on the Facebook groups, warranty claims. So as someone that's had more than his fair share of warranty claims, and whose truck at the moment looks like Martin Meek got a hold of it, it
Let's just take
is
a moment here, and I'm going to share an image right here of your vehicle in its current state because it's terrifying, Chris. It's absolutely
yeah.
terrifying.
It is stripped. It is out. It is gutted. I had, I've posted a while ago that I had a what I thought was a battery problem, and they replaced the battery. They dug deeper. After that, didn't fix it, and found a wiring harness problem. This is the main 12-volt harness that goes from the frunk through the firewall all the way across the dashboard, all the 12-volt equipment that's in the Lightning, and replaced the harness. And I went to drive it off the dealership lot, and when I turned on the AC, the blower fan shorted out. So that harness was bad, and now they are on their second harness. Each harness takes 3 days to get, et cetera, et cetera. And so, and then the seats are taken out of it mainly to protect the seats, because the Lariat has leather seats. So they removed the seats so as not to do any damage while rerunning all these wires and stuff. And so yeah, it's I'm currently now in week 3. I'm hoping to have it back by the end of the week, but I'm more concerned that they put everything back and not have spare parts left over. So Ford, to their credit, has done great communicating. They've had engineers involved. They've given me a loaner. I'll have a video about all that coming out when it's all over. But it's been an interesting journey. But that is the story of Ford, right? EVs that are still on Gen 1 platforms, that have had their growing pains. And I think this kind of informs really the whole call, right? Like, here's Gen 1. We've done our best. It is not something we can make profitable or efficient without starting over. We've got Gen 2 going. And if we were to roll out this three-row SUV, it's just going to be more of the same. And it doesn't make any sense to do that. So we're going to wait till the famous 2027, which is a number people are starting to hear a lot more of. A lot of 2027 dates thrown out there. So that's where Ford is focused. And not to use a pun, Ford focus, but yeah, they that's where their energy is. And so they talked on the call about warranty claims, and I'm probably personally responsible for a big chunk of those. And
They lost a good one billion of their losses was to your vehicle specifically. So
right, yeah, absolutely. So it's so they're looking at all that, right? And they're trying to make the warrant, and they have made improvements and all that. And they've, canceling the 3-row SUV project is a one-time hit. They talked about battery tech is interesting, because the LG batteries right now are made in Europe, but they don't qualify for any of the American tax incentives. So they're talking about in mid 2025, those are being brought into Michigan, those LG batteries. And then that's going to free up capacity for their European manufacturing to then supply Europe, where they do have the e-Transit and they do have a Ford Explorer EV, both of which are on VW platforms, which is so weird. Interestingly, that same platform is used on the VW ID Buzz out there in Europe. So it's weird how Volkswagen has their hands in a little bit of this and that. But anyway, so in the meantime, though, they've been really focused on trying to lower the cost for the Gen 1 products. They've done the best with Mach-E. Mach-E has the highest volume. They've lowered the cost $5,000 on Mach-E. But then they said, hey, look, we did all this work to lower the cost $5,000. And then the market, i.e. Tesla, lowered the price on their stuff on everything. So any savings we could have had evaporated through having to lower costs. And of course, the Lightning, everybody knows, has had a lot of incentives. So any of the little refinements and any of the efficiencies they've gained were all absorbed by price pressure. And so that's kind of where it stands on that. Now you guys know that they're building that battery facility with SK On in Kentucky. So that'll be their LFP. So they'll next, a year from now, less than a year from now, they're going to look a whole lot different, because you're going to have those batteries for Mach E made in America. They'll start to qualify for things. They'll continue to refine, but it'll never be, the profitable thing that it needs to be. So all that energy is focused on the Skunks Works team, that is going to be trying to focus on this Gen 2 product. And as he mentioned, I don't know if it's the first time, it's been hinted at before, but he specifically mentioned a mid-size truck and specifically mentioned that it will be competitive with BYD in terms of cost. And so those are all good things. And
Competitive with BYD in terms of cost is a tall ask.
it is.
Yeah.
That's what this team has apparently been tasked with doing. And so I'm not even sure. Maybe there's more, right? And the midsize is all that he mentioned. Maybe there is a full size somewhere in that equation to replace the Lightning. But the only thing that was mentioned was the midsize. So as of now, T3, as far as officially ever been talked about, is mid-sized, and it's a truck. Again, maybe there's more in that portfolio, but
I think this will have to be its own episode. We'll probably have to film this one soon. But there needs to be an entire conversation around the Chinese EV market, and it's coming. But how do we best offset that potential threat? Like who was it that brought it up? I think I was listening to Trump did the interview with Joe Rogan, and they had a
great one.
3-hour conversation. But part of that discussion was tariffs and
Yeah.
how that affects promoting in United States based jobs. And I think it was Trump specifically that brought up, like, unless you tariff these people 2,000%, like BYD, the Chinese car company, is going to come into the United States and they're going to wreck Michigan, as like all of Detroit's auto market would be wrecked because of that specific offering with the EV investments and things. Like, we can't compete currently on cost. And so the only way to protect that is through tariff type setup. It's its own conversation. But having our manufacturers be able to produce cheaper vehicles is a must, because you're seeing, like we've discussed before, was it like a $10,000 BYD product being released in the Chinese market? And that's just, I mean, we have nothing. I mean, our cheapest model is like 35, 40 grand. And so if BYD is able to come in with low restrictions, then you would see a 40, the 50% cheaper vehicle. I mean, who's not going to buy that?
No, I'll tell you, I'll drop one last nugget from the call, and then that's a great segue, Josh, actually. So the last kind of detail I'll mention is they brought up that Ford has very little of their sales that are done via lease. Only about 10% of their sales are lease sales, which they say some of their competitors are as high as 70% are leases, which they think is going to face them with big residual risks in 2 or 3 years when these leases come up, that Ford won't face. So I took away a lot of positive direction from the call. But that's not what the shareholder meeting folks took away from it, I guess. But to your point about China and about how it would decimate Detroit and whatnot, VW then talked about, and they got their hand in everything. VW, they've, and we'll lead into the Scout, that is owned by VW. You got Porsche is an amazing car that's doing great stuff. They've talked about earlier their partnership with Ford on some of the platforms, but one of the execs from VW announced 3 VW factories were closing down, and basically said their presence and their ability to compete in China is over. And he warned that the Chinese competition is coming into Europe and taking it over, and there's real concerns there, and they just cannot compete with China. And he just said so. He's like, that market is kind of dead to us. Now Ford, interestingly, specifically said they are making profit in China. They are making profit in Europe. They are making profitable EV products. So they figured it out, but not in America yet. And I think that's what Gen 2 will be about. But VW, exactly what you said, Josh, said the Chinese market, because there aren't tariffs, because it is open, they are just killing VW Group. And so, yeah, I think that is a harbinger of things to come if we're not careful. And what's the line there between free market and competitive capitalism and having and too involved government? Man, I'm not smart enough to know it. But the Trump conversation, if he had a very sober, rational, great conversation with Joe Rogan. It had a couple points of hyperbole and questionable stuff that, I know Jesse sent me some clip points that were, about EVs that were, of course, very questionable, and about your field with chargers that was very questionable. We've talked about, So it wasn't a perfect interview, but by I mean,
He
look at
stands by his
this.
factual inaccuracies, and it is what it is.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
in his
yeah,
words, one of the most beautiful words that ever exist is tariffs. It's the best
yeah.
word. It's better than love, tariffs. And
And I
I mean, if
think,
you're promoting American manufacturing, you have to have that structure in place because I mean, there is no I mean, with what they're doing, I mean, if you look at all, not just EVs, if you look across the board with manufacturing, China can do it cheaper. I mean, that's why half our products are made in China. But if you're
yeah,
going to, like, our iPhones are made in China because it's just cheaper to make it there. And so, I mean, with that being the case, like, if you're going to promote that in order to promote American development and American jobs and that type of revenue, there has to either be tariffs or some sort of initiative to lower costs here because we just, I mean, they don't abide by the same labor laws and things that we have that makes it to where they can do things in quantity because they have tremendous population, but also too they can do things for much cheaper, and so it makes a real big pickle from the automotive industry to whatever other industry exists. It is an interesting conversation to have because I mean the we discuss EVs specifically, but that is BYD is a gigantic threat to. I mean, for me as I think I've said this before. For me as a charging station provider, a BYD takes the same amount of juice as any other vehicle, so I don't care.
yeah,
But for a Ford and for the VW and for some of these other people like the GMC that has $100,000 truck, if BYD comes on the scene with a $30,000 pickup truck, all the other EV truck manufacturers are going to be in a real big pickle because that everybody wants an affordable vehicle, and in the housing market it's very similar to a product like DR Horton, who's a nationwide builder. I personally had some grievances against them for quality. At the same time, people don't always care about having the top notch product. They care more about the affordability of the product, and sometimes people are willing to sacrifice quality for price. And a lot of times in the market with the appropriate warranties and with the appropriate assurances, you would see people be willing to jump on that train to take a Chinese vehicle, even if the quality wasn't the same. And maybe it is the same or better. I mean, that's yet to be determined. I've not ever driven a BYD, but a lot of times the cost is compromised by the compromises the quality. But that's something that a lot of buyers, if it's a $25,000 brand new EV that comes with a 50,000-mile warranty, they're not going to care. They're just going to bite because it's affordable.
yeah.
Well, and that
No, go
that the
ahead,
big part about
Jesse.
that is when you start looking at the geopolitical aspects of what we have in America and what products are made here, and really when you look at the numbers, they can do whatever they need to get around some tariffs. When you're talking about what products are made in the United States, I think there's only like, and it's went down the amount that we use here on a yearly basis, but it's like 13 or 14% of everything we use here is a Chinese made product that is shipped here and we buy. But to your point, Josh, when you're saying half, there's like 60% of the products that are made in the United States have parts that are made in China. So
100%.
There it
that's
is.
where you get
Yep.
out of the ability to get around some of these. They don't necessarily have to send it. They just need to send the components and they're still making the same money. So I think there's ways they can get around it that's going to change that. Yeah, are we going to see a BYD? Maybe. When you look at the investment groups behind it with Berkshire Hathaway and then their investment into Pilot gas stations when they bought that out, here you own BYD, a good ownership percentage of it, and now you own a huge amount of gas stations. It's doing a lot to put in charging stations. It almost seems like they're preparing everything to bring it in and then offer even charging at a cheaper rate, which is something they can do if it's their system they didn't take incentives for. So I think there's some maneuvering going on. And I think to Ford's point of trying to target BYD or try to have the cost or standards of BYD or these Chinese manufacturers, that is the way to go because what happens, going to our next announcement, which was the Scout Motors, they've come out with a vehicle that to me is a very good competitor to the Rivian. They even have a gas extender that would get you a 150-mile range on it to where you don't have to worry you're going to be going on
150
a
miles
trip and
more.
be,
Yeah,
yeah,
150 miles
150
more.
more.
It
So it's
goes
a
from
500
350
total.
for the base all electric to 500 with the gas extender.
So what happens though, that's going to be a 60, $70,000 vehicle and a Rivian, a 70, 80. They might cut that, but if Ford can come out with a 40,000, for example, or 35,000 small vehicle that gets the same range and everything, now you're not only undercutting that one that's going to be out in 2 years. Because what did you say, Chris? The release date on it's supposed to be again the magic day
27.
of 27.
Yep.
So now Ford might be targeting releasing a small pickup truck at that time. So, there's a lot of maneuvering, and I think Ford has an advantage here because of the success of, and we've talked about this before, the success of the Maverick shows that America's appetite for that smaller pickup truck with four doors. You can use it to haul whatever, but no, not everybody's going to be hauling, 5 tons of gravel every day with their pickup truck. But a lot of people need it if they want to put a lawnmower back there, if they need to go get some mulch or something like that. So I think that the market is there for it. But now you look at a Rivian or the Scout, you
Yeah.
know, I love the name. I love the retro look. I told you all, I adore the front bench seat in the truck more than anything else. I would get that in a heartbeat if it was offered in any other truck, just because I like the nostalgia. They did a great job in making it look similar. I think this is kind of a shot across the bow for a electric Bronco, if there is going to be a
I was gonna say,
comparison
I
Yeah.
mean,
there.
if you look at the look of these vehicles, I think they both look very sharp. The lighting package, everything looks really good with
Yep.
it. I see the truck a lot more like a Rivian
Yep.
R1T comparison vehicle. It looks very similar. The headlights obviously are different. The front look is different, but the shape of the body is very similar. If you look at the SUV that they've produced, it looks very Bronco-esque. And I love the Bronco. I wish they would come out with an electric Bronco version, but it looks like the actual, like the newer version of the Bronco that they have, and it looks more like an off-roader. The R2, yeah, that no, the R1S, sorry, that is in existence. It was more of like a sporty SUV look to me. It wasn't like, it just didn't speak big, bad, and off-roading. To me, the Scout looks like it's more like a Bronco, which is like an off-roading type vehicle.
Which is
Obviously,
exactly what they were. So my dad in the 80s sold tractor trailers for International. And at
Oh,
that
interesting.
dealership, they also sold Scouts. So oftentimes when they would get a one in, we would have it. I can remember losing an axle going to Virginia one day with dad. I was in the back, probably 4 or 5 years old, 6 years old, something like that. And we saw the wheel pass us, and then it sat down, and then we went into the ditch. We were fine. But so I have memories of that vehicle, and the body lines remind me of an updated version of that. And I think that's where a lot of people are getting, where all SUVs, all cars, all trucks are kind of looking the same. When you bring something that has that retro look, you have something that's unique. I think the Challenger for Dodge was that when they came out with the Challenger body. I think Mustang, when they went from what they did have to the more 65 Mustang look back a few years ago, that kind of brought some of that essence back to it. But my question now is, I love what they're doing. Is 2 years too far away to come out with this? And B, if it's going to cost this much, though I know the build quality is going to be high because Volkswagen knows how to build vehicles. We had a Wolfsburg Jetta that had the little four-cylinder turbo in it, but everything shut like it was supposed to. It felt great. It was always a great car for us, for my wife early on. So I know they make great cars, but is it too late and is it too expensive? I don't know.
and I mean, obviously, this is the pre-production announcement. I mean, maybe things change by the time it actually comes to fruition. My guess is you won't see any major improvements. Maybe. I mean, some of the vehicles have come out with more range based on actual testing and things. But I mean, in this regard, I think it's a good inputting onto the market, but it is still 2 years out. I mean, we're at the end of 24, but even with early 2027 model, that's 2 years until you'd see the first ones dropped. And I mean, by that point, you're going to have a lot of other competitors ramping up their production. So, I mean, hopefully they can find a way to juice that up. I mean, the range itself, I don't know the battery size. I don't know if they've actually rumored that yet. But I mean, a 350 range for electrics right on par with most of the competition. A little bit better, I'd say, than the average competition. The gas generator to get to the 500-mile range is a unique thing, like the Ram Charger type, setup within the
It,
vehicle.
Is that thing ever going to see the light of day?
I
We
don't
don't
think so.
know.
I'm worried about Stellantis, but
But
Yeah.
what is the efficiency there? And I mean, there's a lot to know more about that. But I mean, a 500-mile range with a little bit of gas usage, like a hybrid type of setup, that is a cool functionality. But what does that actually mean to the efficiency of the vehicle? And so, I mean, there's a lot more data to learn about it. But I think it's a very cool, unique looking vehicle. I mean, obviously that big announcement, that it was a big, it was a big, reveal on that front. I mean, we had talked about, me and Jesse had talked about the Scout when they had gotten purchased out, and their developments to kind of see what produced out of that. And I think it looks like a good offering. I do wish it was sooner than 2027, but
Yeah. So
yeah.
long.
So here's my thought on it too. If they came out with this first, if the entire electric market came out with a 350-mile electric with 150-mile gas, which is kind of like a hybrid, just throwing that out there, 2 years ago, then I think all of the three of us here would have jumped on that. So now I look at this and say, okay, in 2 years, is there going to be the range anxiety once you build all of these charging stations? Is that range anxiety going to be there? And then in 2 years, what is the cost of the full size Chevy Silverado that can get probably 450 to 500 miles, the same as what the extender would be, except now you have a full size vehicle versus what would be a smaller vehicle. So I
The
am,
Scout
you
is a
know,
full size though, man. That Scout is as wide as a Hummer. It's bigger than it looks. People, because it looks similar to Rivian, it's actually bigger than a Rivian.
really, okay, I
Yeah, it
missed that.
is. Yeah, yeah. And it's such a weird, these are crazy times that we're in, man. It's really fun. But it's hard to know what direction it's going because there you again, you've got VW, who not too long ago we talked about did a deal with Rivian, and but they've kind of this is its own separate entity, but it is using that Volkswagen deal with Rivian because it's using Rivian's zonal architecture, and you can absolutely see the influence of that partnership. And then tie into it what we talked about with China. The biggest growth segment in China is what they call their plug-in hybrid, as EVs, and plug-in for them isn't what it is for us. In China, their plug-in is exactly what you just talked about, Jesse. It is a little compressor, not a compressor, but a little generator, and they don't do separate. I'm running off a engine powertrain, and I'm going, switching to electric like Honda or some others. It's pure EV driving experience, but it's using when needed the generator to then fill in and extend it. So that's a lot of BYD and a lot of other business is that. And then kind of to your point then about tariffs, right? They're also building these in America, as is what we just talked about earlier with LG moving their batteries to
the
America.
question is
C8.
American made. How much is American made? I know
Yeah. Yeah.
that are the
Great
batteries being
question.
sourced locally? Are the parts? Because I mean, the wide variety of what is quote American made is pretty interesting. I mean, we were looking in the solar panel industry, and there's a lot of times where people are shipping in panels from China, reframing them, so just putting
Yes.
on the little metal casing and slapping a made in America sticker on it. And it's like it's not made in America.
Yeah. And
So but I
this
think I
goes
think that
to
this product is going to be mostly made in America, but the question is how much is
how
really
much.
truly made in America. Uh,
That's Tesla loves to plant their flag. They're right because their supply chain is local. And now they did say on Scout's reveal that they were gonna kind of like what we saw in Kempower. Kempower talked about their supply chain is going to be within that corridor, that tech corridor they have out there. Scout similarly said, and they gave some distances that a majority of their supply would be from that local area and within a certain distance of it. Now, how much I don't know. And Tesla does the best of all of them with being the most American made vehicle. And kind of going back to what you were saying earlier about tariffs, right? Mexico, because of the tariffs, is now the number one trade partner, having taken over China. But to your point earlier, Josh, they are using a lot of exactly what you said. And Ford too, like Ford, when it talked about their Gen 2, they said they feel really confident about being competitive with BYD on their costs because they've already got 60% of their supply line, their supply chain locked in on their pricing that they need to hit to make it be that way. And how much of that, a lot of the American made trucks, a lot of the American made cars that Ford and others do have these parts that still come and imported in from China, and they're assembled here. And Mexico is doing a lot of that. They're bringing stuff in, and they just have to somehow substantially change and modify and transform, I think is the legal term. They have to transform the product. And that to common people, we may think, oh, you've really got to transform it into something amazing. And to your point, Josh, no, you're just taking something and reframing it.
A
But
sticker.
yeah,
I mean, like, something that's interesting to note is, like, in our industry, Jesse and I are putting in these charging stations. The grant process that's doing this had a Buy America provision that
yep.
required these products to be, quote, made in America. And the original intention was like 90% of the parts had to be made in America. The current standard, because they had to drop an exception, I think it's 55% or something like that, of Made America to be Buy America compliant. And so we're still putting in charging stations that are 45% foreign parts. Now, maybe ours is a little bit higher, but like that's the minimum standard to meet the Buy America compliant, because there's no product that's truly made in the United States from start to finish. Even like we had spoken with a US based company that had been in the US for a long, long time with other products. And even their product wasn't 100%. They were like 90% made in America, which is impressive compared to all the other standards. But very few companies can meet up with the higher standard level of sourcing and using mostly American made parts, because most of it has to be imported for cost.
And let that be a lesson to people about the pragmatic, moderate mind, because people freak out on the extremes. Some people might hear what you just said, Josh, and be like, this is ridiculous. We're not even going green. We're not even being made in America. We're bringing stuff in from China, or from China through Mexico, or all this kind of stuff. And then other people on the other side might freak out and say, nobody will be able to drive or buy a gas car. They're going to take my cars. And the truth is in the middle. The truth is that, like a lot of these companies, like Elon Musk himself, a lot of these things are aspirational visions. 90% of this made in America, that, right? No gas vehicles by 2030 or 2035 or wherever. These are aspirations. And then real life hits you. And now you've got 40-50% of it is American, which is more than it would have been had they not put the aspiration out there to begin with. It would have not been anywhere near that. And this is what's going to happen with all this stuff. And this is where the everyday world of reality, these politicians aren't going to decimate the economy. And look, we're not going to be all banning gas vehicles. Like in California, famously where they talk about 2035, it exempts commercial vehicles. Do you know who drives a commercial vehicle? All the F-150 owners. Those trucks, the number one selling vehicle, those are commercial vehicles because of their weight, right? And so
Yep.
there's a number of ways, and it doesn't count used vehicles. So there's a number of, ways. Gas cars are going to be fine. We couldn't switch the grid immediately anyway. The 2035 is a decade away. It will land somewhere in the middle. It won't be the apocalypse. And it's also not tragic when we don't live up to these visions and aspirations. I think that's a great example, Josh, of exactly what real life is like. Hey, we want 90% to be American, and now reality hits you, and that's just not possible. But you don't stick to it. You don't stick to it and cut off your nose to spite your face. You adjust, and you end up better than you would have.
I will say this. I apologize. From all the pictures, I just did not look at the size of that truck.
It's big, right?
And it is as big as the Lightning. It in some ways bigger. So its
Yeah.
total length is 229 and the F-150 is 232. So like 3 inches shorter. But the
It's
width,
3 inches
it's
matters.
60 inch,
Yeah.
our F-150s are 80 inches wide. This thing's 91 inches wide. I mean, I'm looking at this now, really wanting to see a comparison, because in my mind, I thought, okay, that's going to be the same size as a Rivian. But man, oh man, that is
Bigger.
going to be, to have it look like that. It looks like a smaller truck. So, but it has better ground clearance, longer wheelbase than our trucks. There is some interesting things, so I can't wait to see what that looks like. Yeah, we travel through South Carolina a lot, and obviously Volkswagen is out of Tennessee. We have a big plant in Chattanooga, so I know we'll probably have access somewhere at one of these events that we speak at that we can see it. So I can't wait to get some pictures and get some hands-on with that. Unfortunately, you get all the fun stuff in California because you have Tesla nearby. Hopefully, we can take advantage of being close to all these EV companies over here. Now, one other thing I want to point out to this is it came out, and as far as I can tell, it's only NACS only for the charging system. So
Yep.
Here is a company, again, for those who don't know, Electrify America is tied to Volkswagen, and most of your Electrify America stations are CCS. And here's a vehicle being made by them in a way that is NACS. So that, to me, that is the first kind of shot across the bow that the transition to go to NACS will be happening. And I doubt we'll see a lot of NACS and CCS charging heads being located next to each other on a vehicle. I think they're going to go to one standard, and my guess is that one standard is going to be NACS from here on out.
Yeah, I'm curious if Ford is holding on to CCS as long as they are, honestly, because of supply. I'm wondering if they just have a backlog of either contractual obligations, because the 2025 Mach-E and Lightning will continue to have CCS. And my first thought on that is either the cost to re-engineer it, and or it could be wire harnesses, it could be the CCS outlet itself. Maybe they've got contracts they've got to fulfill. I don't know, but I think there's going to be 2027 is a long way away. I think by then everybody will be on NACS, and in the meantime, there'll be this gradual transition
I've
over,
been
and there'll be
surprised that
adapters all over the place.
some of the new release vehicles haven't already switched. They're still
Yeah,
doing CCS on even some of the new ones. Just new like your models, like the Cadillac Escalade. You figure that they would inputted that because it's like brand new onto the market, but they didn't. It's still CCS for now. So I mean, obviously, I think supply chain issues is things, but I mean, it appears as if shout out to episode 1 of Turn Down for What. It appears as if CCS is dying. Just as it's biding its time, really, at the end of the day. And it doesn't mean the CCS vehicles are going anywhere that are all currently existing. I mean, we all drive CCS, and it's not going to get converted over.
yeah.
We're going to use our adapters as long as we drive our vehicles. And yet, I think that the future of that market is a simplified NACS cabling. It looks like, I mean, if Scout is saying that that's going to be I mean, a lot of the manufacturers have said that's going to be their standard, but they're 2 years out. So I'm imagining that they're actually going to release with NACS. And I'd imagine, like you said, mostly in 2 years, we're going to see most of the vehicles being NACS produced at that time. Maybe
Gen
the Lightning
2.
maintains CCS for the next 2 years, but when T is out, I'm sure it's going to be that.
Yeah, and kind of as we wrap up kind of news events, we got to mention Lucid Gravity. So Lucid Gravity was announced that the order banks are going to be coming open in first week in November, I believe, and I think November 6th or something. That is going to be NACS. That one is going to be, I think, by the end of this year, delivering NACS, which will be interesting to see how they charge. And as far as I know, they are not open to the Tesla supercharging network yet. So recently, Polestar, Volvo, I think, was opened up to it. Yeah, Polestar having again some feedback about not being able to manufacture in vehicles or sell vehicles because they don't have manufacturing set up in America. But Gravity, interestingly, yeah, is coming up here, and the first one's gonna be expensive, man, 123,000 or something, and then all the taxes. That's base. It's gonna be crazy expensive to start, and then they say in late 25 is when the touring model. The first one that comes up is the Grand Touring. That's the best of their specs, which makes sense. Cybertruck did the same thing with their highest spec. I would think Gravity is going to be a phenomenal vehicle. That frunk is amazing, exportable power. Kyle Connor is using Lucid now instead of the Cybertruck to charge up his vehicles when they die on test drives because they can export more power out of the Lucid without hitting limits. Ford is limited, of course, to 30 amps. Cybertruck is 40, but it can't actually deliver 40. It has problems, and Lucid with their exportable power is doing a better job of it. So Lucid's got some great engineering. That 79,990 price will be late 25, so a year away, but both of those will be coming out as NACS. So it's happening. Excited
Lucid
to
Gravity
see.
is an incredibly sharp vehicle. I mean, I think Lucid as a brand has done a really good job of
Yeah.
making a well-packaged vehicle. I mean, when we originally jumped on and we met a Lucid official, a government official up in a DC event that we were at, and we were kind of talking about some of their outlays. And I mean, I think that them as a brand have done a really good job at making a unique product. The one thing that's really bugged them is price. I mean, like everybody else, the prices. I mean, the $250,000 Sapphire is a super cool vehicle, but it's a $250,000. And
Yeah,
you go down to their base, Pure is the lowest model, I think.
Air.
Air.
Air, oh,
Yeah.
pure. You're right. Yeah,
One of
yeah.
them was like, the cheapest was like 79 new, and it's a sedan, like it's
And
an
it
eight.
doesn't
Yeah,
it doesn't meet incentives either. It doesn't.
yeah,
It's that same thing with like Mach-E doesn't meet incentives. That's where they need to bring those batteries back into America. Lucid is not meeting the incentive requirements. These companies are going to have to. I don't know if Gravity will. I certainly hope it will. Hope they get that together. The original one won't matter, but a year from now, as they start to deliver the 7991, that one, hopefully they figure out battery, supply chain so they can meet that. And then, of course, they're living on the backing of the Saudi investment fund. So they've got long, daddy coattails there to help them get to where they need to be for Gravity to ramp, and then eventually the midsize. That's their key. That's everything. Everything is Gravity showing that it can be, a more of a market than it has been to date. And then, of course, getting to the midsize. And then Jesse, who was the one that recently took UAE money? So
The
we've
Vietnamese
that.
company,
Yeah,
yeah,
so that's the other news just came out, right?
VinFast, I think. VinFast Auto, is that who it was? Yeah,
Yeah,
VinFast. So VinFast came up there, and now they are also partnering with an AI company or A1 company, I think it was. But anyway, the at the end of the day, their system ended up getting $1 billion investment from the UAE. So, um, you know, oil money going into EVs tells you something when they are investing their own dollars into a different technology.
and what was Volkswagen? How many billions was Volkswagen into Rivian? Five? Am
Oh
I?
wow, it's up there.
It was up. Yeah. So you have Volkswagen bringing in some stuff for Rivian. You've got Lucid backed by Saudi Arabia. You got UAE for VinFast. VinFast also pushed back their construction, which was supposed to be out there. And I get my Carolinas mixed up. Was it South Carolina, North Carolina, one of those Carolinas?
Yep.
Carolina.
Um,
So yeah. So 5 billion on Rivian's investment though. Yeah.
Yeah. So I tell you, these are just interesting times. And for those that don't know, visit my channel, Bo Family EV, for my VinFast video, which I spent a day with. And thank you to them for giving me a VF9, their 3-row SUV offering. I spent a day, went to Electrify America, got to experience it. So yeah, go to Bo Family EV and check that video out. Also on the electric Bronco, our clubs went out to
That
Kindred.
was awesome. Yeah.
Those are incredible throwback Broncos. They also do VW microbuses, and they're electrifying those. And check out that video on my channel as well, which is pretty fun to see. But those are expensive, custom, one of 50 that they make a year. Only certain, none of us on this for today, at least until you guys blow up your charging. None of us are buying Kindred or the new Gravity or any of these soon, but maybe
We
by
could though, if
2027.
you like and subscribe.
Yeah, help us buy the
Help us
Gravity.
out. We'll buy
Help
Gravity
us
for you. Yeah.
like, subscribe, share, comment, please. Help us get one step closer to the Gravity and Kindred.
Your
Uh,
subscription helps us get one step closer.
we need who's that artist that sings with all the sad songs with the dogs and everything. We need her, Melissa, no, not Etheridge. Shoot, I don't know. McLaughlin, Sarah
Oh, Sarah
McLaughlin.
McLaughlin. Yeah.
Yeah, we need her to do a
In
bumper
these
song for us.
lines
No,
of-
we don't want to get monetized or demonetized. Come on
No,
now.
yeah, yeah, don't.
My singing will not get us demonetized. So I'll just
No,
say,
but it will make people leave, which is even worse.
yeah.
So
I'm the hurt puppy in this situation.
Oh, so awesome.
There we go. We digressed real quick, real
Yeah,
hard.
we did.
That's how we go.
Lot to talk about today.
Yeah, a lot of good data. I mean, the overall EV market. I've said this, I think, multiple times in times past, but I think that we are kind of still in that launching phase of some of these companies starting off with the Ford news and seeing the losses and them, changing plans and targets. We have said the 2027 and the 2030 dates. A lot of the other countries around us are a little bit further ahead on some of these other initiatives, but charging station nationwide availability. EVs aren't going anywhere. I mean, we've had that discussion too, but people have had the concerns about, are EVs dying, if the administration changed, blah, blah, blah. Next week, we have a presidential election and there could be, oh, what's going to happen next? We'll have an episode talking about that. But all that being said, there is nothing that is going to significantly happen in the EV market to the negative. We are seeing these companies make these investments. vehicles will start coming along, in line, economy of scale. We're going to see these things improve. We are at that edge of you can't make a cheap vehicle when you're making 50,000 of them. You have to make 5 million of them to have better cost efficiencies, and so that's where we are in that process of ramping up. But the one thing to note, and I've said this again, 2 years ago to today, the EVs in the United States have gone up 100%. We had
Yeah.
100% increase in the amount of EVs on the road in the last 2 years. And we've had all the FUD, all of the discussions and, Ford's pullbacks, all of that. EVs have doubled on the roads. And so, it's not like this market or this industry is not going anywhere. It's just, it is crawl, walk, run. And I think we are right at
Yep.
that edge distance of between the crawl and the walk. That's kind of where the EV market's at. 2027, I think, will classify as the walking phase of the EV industry. And then hopefully by the 2030s, we're going to see that really ramping up to where, adoption would improve. And going back to the conversation about the mandates and stuff, I think that we will see a market and a world in which maybe 30% of the roadways are EVs. And I think that's a significant step towards sustainability and a good
It would be.
affordability option. But I think 30% is a very lofty and high target for the roadways. But achieving that goal is a significant step up from where we're at now. And I mean, what promotes that is charging station availability and affordability of these vehicles. And then obviously once all those vehicles hits, making sure power can be generated cost
Yes.
effectively, because
Yes.
we can't have a dollar kilowatt power and make people buy EVs, because that's just not going to make any sense.
Well, I mean, it works for Chris, so.
Yeah, Chris would do it, but over here in East Tennessee, I'm not paying more than 20 cents. So
Thank God I have solar. I couldn't do it without solar. And it's a concern. It really is. I mean, supply and demand. COVID should have taught us this. You have a huge increase in demand and the supply isn't equally as robust, you're gonna have price increases. And we see this with
Inflation?
yeah, right. Yeah, you got inflation, you have different dynamic pricing levels. I think the airlines started that idea of demand pricing. I don't, maybe I'm wrong on that, but I feel like airlines started that where and yeah, you see it in charging stations, you see it in power rates now, and it will, man, get in now while the cheap stuff is there and the incentives are there. Cause yeah, eventually that will happen. And we gotta get power. I believe nuclear, like Jesse wants to go hydrogen. I get it.
Oh,
Some
I want to do
people
nuclear too. I mean, trust me, when you live in Tennessee, there's a lot of nuclear plants, and Oak Ridge National Labs is right down the road. Oak Ridge is the one of the earliest nuclear plants that was built. So there's a lot of history in Tennessee for that, and a lot of safety that's been discussed. But I have no concerns at all about my community having one of these SMRs, and I think it's going to have
yeah,
to have. You can't use energy, no matter how pro environment you are, you have to have energy even to make the things that are, solar panels. You have to have energy to do all of this.
absolutely.
And, so the I guess that is the thing that I always tell Josh and a lot of people, when you come to me with a problem, make sure you have a solution first. And in this case, we're going to everybody can agree we're going to need more power from here on out, probably exponentially while AI is happening. So how can we do that in a way that we can actually do it and provide it to everybody that
and I
wants,
can tell you
especially when my
definitively,
Tesla robot comes out and starts doing my
Yeah,
gardening.
let's
and I
go
can tell you
Optimus.
definitively, windmills aren't the solution to that problem. We have to have efficient and cost-effective ways to generate power. Maybe, there's supplemental things like that can add on, but you can't rely 100% on solar. You can't rely 100% on wind, because those are not guaranteed variables. And we have a lot of consumption demand. So
A mix.
a cleaner energy source such as nuclear is something to definitely look into. I mean, I was out of town and went on the Icon of the Seas, the largest cruise ship in the world, and it is the first ship of that class that's run on natural gas. And
Interesting.
and so
Wow.
they no longer use the same fueling methods. But we were at the last port, and they brought up a ship that toted itself up next door and was pumping in liquid natural gas. And that's now and it's
Interesting.
not electric, it's not hydrogen, and
Right.
but it is a significant step
For
toward
sure.
a more sustainable and more efficient cruise experience. And it worked very well. I mean, I didn't see any issues with it, but from everything that I can understand, that's a growing market within the cruise industry. And I think batteries and hydrogen are a long, 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 long way from ever seeing any place in that space. But natural gas might be the next best step. And they use the same type of things for electrical generation. I mean, there's all sorts of creative solutions that are steps in the right direction. And that's a solution that Royal Caribbean specifically done for that ship model. And I mean, it looks like it's doing a great job for what it is. So
Another great example, Josh, of where people get they let perfect be the enemy of better.
yeah,
And there are certainly ways to criticize EVs and where battery stuff comes from and the environmental hit to manufacture them, but it's objectively better. And getting away from coal is objectively better. And here's another example: is natural gas, electric, and sustainable? Da, da, da. No, but it is objectively better. When I went on my cruise, I was able to do a behind the scenes tour, talk to the engineers. Was really fascinated. They have typically two different fuel types. They have a fuel type that they use within a certain distance from shore because of regulatory reasons. They have to use a certain fuel that's more expensive and have scrubbers and all these kind of things. And then when they get out into the open ocean, they use very polluting different oils without the scrubbers and dumping stuff in the so natural gas, is it perfect? No, but it's so much better. And we need to get out of this mindset of trying to nitpick apart how something's not perfect, because it's never going to be perfect.
Yeah, cruise ships aren't going to run on solar panels anytime soon, but can you get it on natural gas? Yes, and it worked very well. And I mean, it looked like it was doing a terrific job. And from everything,
That's awesome.
it's a much more efficient emittance goes and everything else.
So this is the kind of rabbit hole I go down. So I was telling Josh and Chris about an idea, when I was just sitting here, and all of a sudden I thought, well, if you put solar panels beside each other all the way down a train car that is a mile long, how much power would that be if it's just going down the track? And then
Someone
how
did it.
much, and then I did all the math on it, did it, and then it amazed me that you would have all of those panels on top of that train car, and it wouldn't even get you,
A single chew.
3%
It wouldn't get
of
you a
what
single
it needed.
chew.
Now you could do the batteries, 3 or 4 compartments of batteries and get enough, but you needed, I forgot even what the numbers were that I sent out. It was an astronomical amount that was needed. And luckily those numbers are available because a diesel electric is basically a hybrid system. So they know how much energy from a megawatt standpoint is needed for a train. And I think that'll come one day as well. But it's not as easy as what you think. Just putting up a bunch of solar panels is not the solution. I think batteries, if you go that route, and I don't think there's enough materials for them right now. So some of these alternative systems are definitely going to be needed. I still think it's an all above energy extravaganza to get what's needed. And then eventually
I agree.
the one that's the best will eventually come out ahead. But
I think the mix is going to be necessary. You're going to have areas where it makes sense with hydro. You're going to have areas where it makes sense
yep.
with solar. You have areas where it makes sense with nuclear. It's going to take all of them. Solar is incredibly inefficient. I mean, you're getting very low percentages of energy out of solar, but when it's just sitting there in the sun in California, Arizona, Nevada, all these different areas where they get plenty of it, eventually it builds up. My panels get me anywhere from 20 to 40 kilowatts a day, depending on what time of year, and less if it's overcast or stormy. But I've recently been talking to a company that makes tonneau covers and trying to look at some options for my lightning that I need. And it's not ready yet, but they have a solar tonneau cover that will go on the back, and it'll charge up a secondary battery. And then that battery can then be used to do things. But it takes 3 hours to charge up like I want to say like a 3 kilowatt hour battery or something. And it's not 3 kilowatts into my lightning is nothing. Right. But
Or
if it's
that
sitting
1.5 miles,
right. But if it's just sitting and again, it has to go into a separate battery bank. It's not like it goes directly into the truck. And that's you think about the 5.5 foot bed on a lightning, that's a considerable amount of solar panels, but that shows how inefficient it is. That said, and Fisker famously has their solar roof, and these things provide very little. But look, if they're sitting out there in the sun for hours and days. It's going to give you a something, which is not zero. But it's more, yeah. Solar has its place. It's not going to be in those kind of places. It's going to be where you can have giant farms of solar that can absorb the sun, put them into batteries, be used when necessary. I think you guys are looking at some of those options for what you're doing, even. So yeah, everything's got a place, and there's not one. And you don't, like anything, like your investments, like Ford itself, you want a diversification. Not everything's going to always achieve at all times. You don't want to be stuck to where you've only got one energy source and something happens. Climate does change, geopolitical things do change, resources change. So
And
I'm
that's
all
a
about.
good segue. So next week, we're going to talk about what we feel like is going to change over the next 4 years. Is it going to stay the same? Is it going to change? Neck and neck? We don't
We
know.
will not,
But
we will
whatever
post the
does
episode.
happen,
We will try to
be able
post the
put our
episode Wednesday afternoon, as long as
Yeah.
we announce a presidential winner by that point.
Hopefully we know by then. Yeah.
Go out and
yeah.
vote, and then we'll let you know as soon as the episode's posted.
And we've looked at both sides, so we kind of have a good understanding of that. And hopefully by that point, we'll have a way to discuss that on a higher level that we could say, here's what we think is going to happen. We
We'll
don't
bring
know.
the presidential nominee or president-elect on the podcast, and we'll have a discussion with them.
Yeah,
We'll
we'll have
invite
whoever
him.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get that going.
It is awesome.
But yeah, next week we'll have that discussion. I mean, obviously we have the election in just
6 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From here, 6 days.
Yeah.
But yeah, go out and vote, and then next week we'll have a discussion around what the next steps might look like for the EV industry as a whole, around whatever that outcome is, and we will go from there. So,
Like and subscribe, ring that bell.
absolutely, ring that bell. You can ring my bell. All right.
No,
Don't get us
stop.
copywritten.
I'm done. Once again, my singing will never copyright us. I promise that.
It's not that. It's people leaving.
That's so funny.
Well, it's the end of the episode, so people can leave after you like and subscribe and ring
the bell.
All
right. Great. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Turn Down for What. Tune in next week for more EV news, updates, and whatever may come.
See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to Turn Down for What. Make sure you're subscribed with your notifications on to tune in to more EV news and updates. See you next time.